Good evening, folks. Instead of asking you to participate in tonight's class, I'm sure many of you have other things to do, so I'm just sending a recording. This recording is about the concept of consciousness in Kabbalah. Essentially, it has to do with the 5 levels of soul that we were spoken about before. As you probably remember, the Midrash mentions that there are 5 names to the soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Those are the 5 names. I'll give you a chart with them in a minute. You'll be able to see them clearly. In any event, the sages tell us that the 5 levels of soul are essentially 5 levels of consciousness. Because there are 5 different names, that is indicative of the fact that there must be 5 different levels. Now, let me just give you an example of this, how this kind of thing works. There is again a midrash when Moses is speaking to God, and he asks him, "Who shall I say sent me?" This is by the burning bush, when God was sending Moses back into Egypt. He'd escaped from Egypt, to sending him back into Egypt to come and to go and redeem the Jewish people from Egypt. So when Moses gets this mission, he says, "Well, who am I going to say sent me?" So the midrash explains. God says in response, "My deeds, my name you want to know? According to my deeds I am called." And then it goes on to list various divine names that are found in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, in the Bible, and explains that each name represents a different type of activity. Shem Elokim B'Gvura, Shem Havai B'Rachamim, and so on and so forth. Shem Kel B'Chesed. We've gone through these names on previous occasions in a previous video. So let me just give an analogy to be able to explain this a little bit better. Each one of us has many different relationships, but the title of those relationships, so to speak, each relationship has a different title. For example, to my parents, I would be son. To my children, I'm father. To my wife, I'm husband. To my friends, I'm friend. To an employee, I would be called boss. To an employer, I would be called worker, employee, or whatever. Okay, so there's different kinds of relationships, and each different relationship has a different name. Similarly, we have different relationships to different levels of consciousness, and these are called by different names. So we have 5 names of the soul, and these are the 5 names of the 5 levels of consciousness. Now, ignore the right side of this for a moment. We're just going to focus for right now on these levels over here. I hope you can see it clearly. If anyone wants this document, you just drop me an email at kabbalahdecoded@gmail.com. Again, kabbalahdecoded@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to send you a copy, free of charge, of course. So, starting at the bottom, nefesh consciousness. What is the nefesh conscious of? The nefesh is conscious of the physical world. It's really physical consciousness that we're talking about over here. Physical consciousness. Ruach consciousness, or the Ruach level of soul, is emotional consciousness. I'll explain this in a little bit more detail soon. Then we get to Neshama consciousness, which is intellectual consciousness awareness. Chaya consciousness is the consciousness of purpose. In other words, my purpose in this world, essentially. And Yechida consciousness would be God consciousness, non-awareness of self, even what my purpose is, but awareness completely of the divine of God at all times. Okay, we're going to go through a couple of examples and we'll see it a little bit more clearly soon. Now we're going to focus on this over here. These are various gradations of each one of these. So you have your current situation, which is discernible or accessible by using the power of da'at of the soul, the power of da'at of the soul. Again, for those who are not familiar, Da'at is one of the Sfirot. It's one of the three intellectual Sfirot. There's Da'at, there's Binah, and Chokhmah, right? Probably Chokhmah should be spelled with a capital. Da'at is that intellectual quality that is essentially focus. It's that they are focus and concentration and connection. That's what Da'at is all about. The second level, a higher level, is Bina, because Da'at tells you what your current situation is now. It's the ability to be able to discern and delineate clearly your current situation in all of these levels. What's my level of nefesh? What's my level of ruach, neshama, chayechi, etc. in my current situation? That would be Da'at. Alternatives are the idea of Bina. Bina really means understanding. It's usually translated as understanding, but it's understanding at a very deep level. It's understanding not only of where I am, but what my possibilities are, where I could be, what my alternatives are. That would be the Bina level. Now, the Bina level is obviously a much higher level than simply understanding my current situation, because Bina is the ability to see myself in a better, more advanced situation than I am now. Where I am now is not necessarily where I want to be. I want to be on a higher level. Therefore, we know that that Bina, it corresponds to the 50, it says that there's the 50 gates of Bina, the 50 gates of understanding. So how do the gates of understanding, where do we learn them from? One of the sources of the concept of the 50 gates of understanding is the 50 times that it speaks about the exodus from Egypt in the Torah. It speaks about the exodus from Egypt. As part of the exodus, not just a description thereof, there are 50 times that it talks about actually going out of Egypt. In other words, the concept of liberation and moving from a state of imprisonment or a state of confinement to a state of freedom. And in this, there are 50 levels of exodus, so to speak. So when a person in his current situation wants to have an exodus, move to a higher level, so that's where Bina comes in, understanding what my alternatives are. Realistic alternatives, not unrealistic alternatives, realistic alternatives. Obviously, there's an alternative for me to spread my wings and fly, which I can't do because I don't have wings and I can't fly, obviously. But the alternatives are realistic things. Then we come to the level of mastery of any particular level, which is the idea of Chokhmah. Chokhmah is when a person actually transcends his own ego, he transcends his own self, and becomes something beyond himself. Now, I'm sure you've heard when a master of any particular area is, so to speak, in the zone. I think that's the slang expression for it today. That the common expression is the person is in the zone. In other words, it's a sort of effortless ability to see things in the bigger picture. That would be the concept of Chokhmah. Now, let's give a couple of examples. I'm going to keep this class short because I know that on the 4th of July, a lot of people are not going to be spending too much time watching videos. But in any event, let's go Nefesh consciousness. What's Nefesh consciousness, or the physical consciousness, in the current situation? Let's, for example, think about an athlete. So an athlete has to be aware, or someone who wants to be an athlete, has to be aware of what his capabilities are, right? What am I able to do right now? Where am I holding right now? What am I capable of doing at this moment in time? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? On a higher level, when the person starts to become more aware of the various possibilities of what he could become, the various possibilities of moving to a higher level, so that already gives much more, let's say, impetus and much more motivation to get beyond the current situation. wisdom or mastery of that particular sport, let's say, is when a person is sort of completely in harmony on, I think one of the terms that they use is resonance with the thing that he's doing, whether the person is an athlete running, whether it's martial arts or whatever it may happen to be. When a person is completely in resonance with the thing that, or even something like chess maybe, right? When a person is in complete resonance with that particular thing, it almost seems to be effortless because it's self-transcendent. He doesn't feel it as himself or herself, but feels it sort of as in a sense, as a transcendent being, the level of Chokhmah. The same thing would apply to Ruach consciousness, right? There's a consciousness of where it is that my emotions are right now. Where are my emotions, and what is my current emotional state? What's controlling my emotional state? What's motivating, what's lighting up my emotional state? Or what's impinging on me in such a way that I'm perhaps not in control of my emotional state. Something else is in control of my emotional state. Emotional alternatives, or I think what they would probably call today emotional intelligence, is understanding the various alternatives and how to change one emotional state into a better emotional state, how to get out of a current state into a better state. Mastery of that would be when things have reached their optimal level. In other words, where the emotions are properly controlled by the intellect and doing the right thing, they're moving in the right direction. The same thing would be when we come to intellectual levels. There's my current intellectual ability, there's the alternatives to my current situation, the ability to get beyond myself, to get to the real depths of a concept or an idea or a meditation, and so on and so forth. And then ultimately we come to mastery, where a person can switch this on and off at will and sort of live within that mastery of things. Higher consciousness, this is again awareness of my purpose, what my current situation is. Do I know what it is that I'm supposed to be doing in the world? What are my alternatives? And then ultimately coming to the mastery of that by actually getting to that level. I'm not going to go into God consciousness as far as these are concerned, because once one is already at this level of consciousness, you will know exactly what to do. But it's basically the same thing. Even in Yechida, there are levels of mastery. The highest level of mastery, of course, is when a person is able to come to the level of prophecy or divine inspiration, where the Yechida of his soul is revealed completely to him. In other words, he's living within his Yechida. Okay, I'm going to call it a day for that for today's class. I hope you enjoy it, and perhaps in a future class we can go on to discuss each of these boxes here at greater length, and perhaps do some deep dive into one or two of them. Okay, all the best and have a great